Hello and welcome to this to yet another edition of the series of education webinars that the Hindu conducts every Saturday. It's September 6th and it's 5 o'clock, time for another webinar. Today's webinar is again, it drills deep into AI again. It's actually inspired by what we did last week. Last week, we spoke about how AI can be used to promote critical thinking among students, because that was the big worry that if ChatGPT or whatever can give you homework and can give students what they want, how much will they learn? So they can learn not just facts, but how to think. And AI can be tailored to that. And that form of AI can be the standard AI for applying in education. And when we were discussing that, we had an interesting segue into this issue of what tools should the government deploy, or even state governments, or even others. What sort of AI tools should be deployed in education? And inevitably, the question of digital haves, have nots that came. Will AI only accentuate the digital divide, or will it help to bridge it? And should governments go for proprietary AI, or should they go for something more open source and then sort of build smaller tools at the local level using this larger free AI, if that's there at all? So those questions came up, and I thought we will we will dive deep into that question. And so once again, we have a really good panel who are here to share their perspectives. Is very distinguished. We have Bhanu, who was there last time. We have Parth and we have Priyanka. They represent various segments of this issue. So the question of tools in AI, I mean, if you were to give a little introduction, when software was being widely deployed for government, in government, to do government services, there was this big question: should government sign up with private with companies, corporates for their software, or should they go for what was called free software, open source? But while open source had its advantages, there was this big argument that if something goes wrong with free software, you have to depend on this nebulous internet to solve the issues. So you have to depend on somebody's altruistic tendencies to solve the issue. It appeared that way at that time. Of course, things have changed. The debate discourse has changed quite a bit. But at that time, that was a big hitch in deploying this open source free software. And we don't know if those questions are still relevant. They perhaps are relevant, but this is another churn when there's another new technology that's coming up that promises to change a lot of things, including education. So what sort of tools should be deployed in education? It's a very relevant question. I throw the floor to panelists. We could probably start with Bhanu again. Perhaps, Bhanu, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, give your opening remarks on this topic?
Thanks, Kalyan. Pleasure to be back again on the channel. So my background is primarily in the intersection of technology and markets. I focus on digital transformation in the SDG verticals, primarily the education, health, and agri and livelihoods, and a little bit of gender work as well. That's my background. For the last 28 years, I've been doing that all the way from the Web 1.0 all the way to now to AI, and maybe in future as we go forward. Back to the main topic of our question in terms of education or AI in education. Should the tools be proprietary or open source? I think the way I would look at that question is from the point of view of the user, right? And I'm just sticking now to the education segment. When we look at education as a segment, as a learner point of view, there are typically at least three segments or three socioeconomic bifurcatable learners, right? One is, of course, the top 2-3% of India, and then there's a whole large middle section, and then there is a even bigger, larger section of learners who are in our public institutions, primarily the public schools and the state public schools and all of that stuff, right? And when AI, something like AI, whatever, irrespective whatever tool it is, comes into these kind of scenarios like education, what immediately happens is the ability to either access it or not access it by reasons of infrastructure, connectivity, or cost comes into play, right? And that's the lens through which I would be more looking at this point in time in the conversation. But I'll pass it on to the next person, and I'm sure I'll come back with a few more thoughts as we go forward. Maybe a Parth can go forward.
Oh,
Oh, you're
thank you
on
so much,
mute.
Kanyan, for having me on this webinar. This is actually my first time to join the Hindu webinar. I'm happy to know that you have been doing this regularly, and I hope that we could also be part of that from the Indian School of Public Policy. I'm currently the Dean of the Indian School of Public Policy, also a co-founder. Before that, I was with the Center for Civil Society, one of the think tanks based in New Delhi. Uh, there, of course, we worked on very similar areas that Banu is working on with the technology mind approach. We used to work, or we continue to work from the public policy point of view in those sectors. I think I like in the topic of today, like the analogy that Kalyan started with, right? So what happened with the software adoption? I think I also remember a big debate on that issue, whether we should go for a free open source or free software, or should we take proprietary software? Not just for government, also I think applies to many education institutions, including private one like ours, right? Uh, my sense is that that question never got really fully decided, right? Either in one way or the other. I think we sort of muddle through using both, right? And you can see various departments of government as well as universities adopting, some of them adopting sort of open source software, some of them adopting proprietary software, and quite a few of them having a mix of them, depending on the, I think, urgency or vitality or centrality of the system. Right? If something depends so critically on the system, maybe then you go for proprietary software. Or other places you want to try out open source. So I think that our experience in the software discussion, I think, is quite illustrative. I like thinking in analogies also. That also helps me to see, particularly when there are no clear-cut answers, there are no sort of engineering answers to some of these questions. And therefore, I think it's important to think more broadly from our experience in the past. I would stop with one sort of follow-up question to that. So is software similar to AI in terms of debate that we are having today, or is not? And that, of course, would also help us to think through a little more in terms of how the previous experience is applicable or not applicable to the current topic.
You have to enlighten us, sir. You're the best person. We'll probably get to that. Banu, very nicely put. You gave the context to this. I now ask Priyanka, who's, I'm not sure she's, Parth is obviously old enough, and we probably remember the whole debate, but Priyanka perhaps not. Well, it's good that we have a mix of these panelists. And tell us more about yourself, and where do you see you're in the sort of you have a business with AI products, right? So how do you see it? So for that valuable perspective, we have you here. So tell us.
Thank you. Thanks, Kalyan. It's such an honor to be amongst all of you, dignitaries. I've been following all your work so closely, and it does shape up the world that we are living in right now. I'm Priyanka Kamath. I'm the founder of 100 Giga. Technically, it's a journey from, 100 girls to billion. We are building population scale solutions with the young builders of our country, and we are predominantly open source. This is because we can scale solutions better, especially when we are dealing with societal challenges that can be solved with technology. We are predominantly ensuring that, in a world after AGI, where AI can probably do skill X, skill Y better than a human, what additionally are we bringing to the table of our students, and how we can make them better equipped for the age of AI? And that's where, the EQ, the creativity, how to do critical problem solving, how to go on field sites, do research, and bring those solutions to fruition with technology is predominantly what we do. We source the problem statements from startups around us. This could be agri-tech startups. We're building for rural educators. We're building for pediatric surgeons. We're building for financial literacy of girls dropping out of schools in India. It's a staggering number of 23 million. So that's a passionate area that we are solving at the moment. And Parth and Banu rightly mentioned, it really depends on the kind of problem we are solving at the moment. So the current problem with the financial literacy app that we're building requires something like an open source, because then we don't have to restrict ourselves to a cohort of 100 or a 200. We can just open up to 7,000 girls who are actually coming this September to us, and show them how to pick up tools which can not only aid their learning but also give predictive solutions that are long term and sustainable. So that is the goal, and the open source is the way forward.
Thanks so much. Manu, tell us if you can give us the architecture of this AI world in education.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
so. Let's when we look at AI, at least there are. I'm oversimplifying this highly, but there are actually three layers to it, right? Firstly, for AI to work, somebody has to build a model, right? What we hear today as an LLM or whatever else models, and then there are the second set of people who come and use that models and create various solutions, right? For example, ChatGPT 5, GPT-5 is a model, and there are various models on which OpenAI and Microsoft and all of these entities create user experiences on top, the ones which we log in and interact with, right? And then there is a third layer, which is slightly looking into the future, which is agentic layer, wherein so in the second layer, what is happening is that we go to the AI tool and ask it for certain information or certain things which it does for us, like finding information primarily. But in agentic level, which is the third level, what will happen is it will actually start doing tasks for us, right? Like you can go to a second tier AI in the way I articulated and go and say, find me the cheapest ticket to go from Delhi to Bangalore, right? But in the third level where the agentic comes, I can even ask it to go and book it. So on my behalf, go and book the ticket, right? So there are these three levels of, let us say stack. I'm oversimplifying here quite a bit, right? Because I know that the audience is not very technical, maybe. To build models, which are the very first layer, it is an expensive affair. It's an extremely expensive affair. And that needs a lot of investment. Either the investment can come from, market players or tech giants or any such, people who are entities who are primarily looking for building some technology and then creating a business value and getting a margin or value out of it. Or the models can be built by governments, right? We are already starting to see conversations about whether countries should start thinking about building their own AI models, right? There are some experiments and early work on that, which is already happening in IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, and IIT Delhi. In particular, for example, in India, the AI for Bharat initiative sitting in IIT Madras creates a lot of models for Indian languages, which maybe a Western company would never worry about creating, right? They might create for Hindi and maybe one or two other big languages, but would they create for all the 28 languages which we have, or even the next set of languages where under 5 million people in India are speaking, right? So those are particularly our problems which we have to solve for ourselves. And that is where, non-market actors like the state and institutions need to come in, right? And once those actors start coming in, then there is a question of whether we charge for that usage or not charge for that usage, right? It is less of a question of whether it is an open source or a non-open source. It is more a question of whether the player who's building it is really looking for a margin or not, right? Now, why I'm articulating it this way is because if I'm a state education department, let me just take an X state in India, right? And if I'm a state education department and I want to roll out, I see that my students from grade 1 to grade 8 are not getting strong enough in math, and I want to roll out a math practice solution at population scale to every child in my state, right? When such kind of aspirations come in, which I'm sure are going to come in the very near future, because we are already seeing this happening in various other countries like China and Singapore and various other places, and India is not going to be very far behind. When such things happen, the interesting question to really look at is, how do I get this tool or the access for this tool to the very last public school in the remotest village, to the last child in my state, right? That is what the state education department or a state health department or an agriculture department would be worried about and would be focusing on, as opposed to the market players who will just kind of say that, let me offer a service to those people who can buy it and I make a margin out of it, and that's where my aspiration stops, right? So there are these two sides of coin which we need to look at, and I think for me it is almost impossible to expect the market players to build for everybody in the population. I think there is no other way but for institutions and state actors to come in and start thinking about sovereign models, sovereign services on top of the sovereign models, and then maybe in future sovereign agentic AI as well.
Parth, can you weigh in? I think he dropped some very interesting points that may require your perspective.
Let me first continue on the analogy about the software and AI,
Yes.
and then maybe use that to sort of also triangulate with what Banu pointed out. And maybe part of that I can talk about what we are trying to do at ISPP, not in terms of the AI policy, but in terms of how we are dealing as an education institution with the challenges that come with the use of AI by our scholars, by our students, right? So I think on the analogy, my sense is that what happened in software, that we actually had a very functional software, right? You had a software which is word processor, then there's of course software which does the data analysis, and so we have categories of software, and therefore in that case I think we were able to avoid complete sort of bifurcation between proprietary versus open source. And as you can see, many of us adopted some part of that which was open source, some which is proprietary, right? And I think that's how the sort of software domain sort of played out in the last 30 years or so. My sense is the AI is sort of different from software in that comparison, because AI does everything in one single bucket, right? As Banu pointed out, if you look at the 3 tiers, and each tier obviously is performed by all of the major current offerings of the within the domain of AI. So my sense is this AI, maybe we learn more possibly in terms of understanding the implications by thinking about the choice of language, the debate that we have had for a long time in India, right, between the English language, English medium education versus the local language or mother tongue education. And I think that's the kind of a choice that we are in a sense making, which seems more analogical to the choice within the AI domain between proprietary and open source. So I think if we look at the debate that we had about language choice, maybe that's can provide some more fruitful sort of comparison with the AI debate. Let me just say one thing about what Banu pointed out, and maybe then pass on to Priyanka. The way I think we are thinking at ISPP is the distinction between learning and doing. So when you want to do things, obviously AI is one of the many tools you have at your disposal, and you should be free to use that tool. You may also need to invest some time to learn the tool effectively, right? So all of that in terms of doing is one thing. So when we tell our scholars at ISPP that when you graduate and go out, your employer doesn't really care how you get things done, as long as you get them done on time and of a high quality, right? But as an education institutions, I do care, right? Because learning is different from doing, and that is really where I think the real sort of challenge lies for us as a policy school, right? and how do we do learning in these sort of context of AI, right? For example, we can no longer, so in my course that I teach at ISPP, I used to give 3 or 4 research topics for them to write research papers on as a way to do the assessment of my course, right? But that's option is no longer available, because the moment you assign a topic, AI can answer all of those questions that you want to do. It can write a research paper for you, maybe even better than your professor can write, right? And so I think there's a big debate in terms of how do we then do the assessment in colleges. And that's really where we are spending quite a bit of time with the faculty and others to think about what are the ways of assessing students' learning in the age of AI. So let me stop there with the distinction between learning and doing, and of course the 3 tiers, which applies to all the 3 tiers that Banu talked about.
I will flag an interesting question, but I will uh, ask Priyanka to weigh in on this. When you are deciding what both Bhanu and Parth gave very specific criteria, but how do you decide? You're somebody who's implementing it at the business side.
Yes, Kalyan, we have such a peculiar problem in front of us, especially we as a youngest technological nation are relying so much on the Western Hemisphere data. And we are trying to build for our, grassroots level. So really, we don't have a choice but to go forward with sovereign AI. And that is how we take our decision, like who is the audience we are building for, where will the solution get deployed, and who are ultimately the problem solvers also, what is the lens they are coming with. Because just if you take in case of my instance, I am Konkani speaking from birth, but have been raised in Hyderabad, but my sense is still very much Konkani, and I'm trying to save that language from dying down. So I'm building a Konkani LLM which will probably save that language for the generations to come. And this we are doing with open source with different artifacts, just to keep it very simple, because there are all kinds of different audience joining in. So we save data facts from the Konkani food, the Konkani fashion, the Konkani language, the way we do our religions and customs, the way we sing, the way we cook. So these are different artifacts that are saved in different databases, and then the data is technically trained and strengthened by the number of people contributing to it. So when you go at this scale, and when we are restricted by proprietary AI, which probably needs the state of the art H100s, which are these NVIDIA GPUs to process tons of data. How will you build population scale solutions when you have restrictions of that level? So that is why it's really important, like Bhanu was saying, and Parth also added that government models are what is really important at this point. And we're doing this in partnership with Triple IT Hyderabad, and we are technically building for the global south, where all kinds of languages and the cultural nuances are brought to the classroom, so that the students Gen Z understand the lens that they are working with, and are able to either build LLMs that then eventually go on to become agentic solutions. By that, which I mean is LLM, which is a large language model, is currently restricted to only think and predict at the moment. But when you bring an agent in place, it actually starts acting and becomes like a second augmented brain, right? So we are going from prompt engineering based LLM to more action oriented autonomous way of solving, where like Banu was telling about the cheap air tickets, we were even looking at some of these ways where the women in India, which is like 48% representation, they are not contributing to the GDP entirely. So how can an agent just go and shop women led products or women led businesses? That way we can directly add to 770 billion GDP by bringing women's productivity into the angle. So all of these things we do factor in, and that's where the solutioning comes from. And sovereign AI is something we are very bullish on. I think India needs to go to a product and innovation mindset with sovereign AI versus just adapting from the West at the moment.
I will flash this question, or can you flash Jaya Dubey? She's asking she's saying where data privacy is not a major concern, there open source can be used. Is that what do you think?
I would like to come in here. So on the data privacy situation, as a country, we are also evolving, and I think by the end of the year we will have the DPDP Act out in the country. Um, when we really look at uh, a lot of uh, promises which the state makes to the citizens, like education, health, and livelihood, and these kind of things. Uh, I'm a little bit doubtful about whether there is anything where data privacy is not an issue. In my view, any transaction has certain amount of data privacy involved. Uh, it's less about whether data privacy is there or not, and thereby I go for open source or not. There are a lot of open source solutions in the software world which do deal with data privacy quite sophisticatedly as well. There are also a lot of proprietary tools in the software side who actually don't care about data privacy. So I wouldn't use the lens of data privacy to make a decision on open source or non-open source. The fundamental aspect which I worry about when I come to open source is, uh, and open source generally is that a set of people who are forming a tribe and building for a larger set of audience and not expecting any money in return or a margin in return. That's really what open source is, right? Now, the biggest question there is the maintainability of the software, right? What happens when something goes wrong? And when I deploy that kind of situation in sort of critical services like healthcare or agriculture or education, the government and the state infrastructure cannot be at the mercy of few good Samaritans to come and fix the tech problems they have. And that is why, if you look at, even the government is starting to build its own technical capacity. The way in which the National Informatics Center is adding more talent to it and adding more technology stack to it, uh, does take care of all of that stuff. For me, the real question would be uh, whether AI solutions, whichever level they belong to, are they going to create two classes of citizens, one who can access them and one who can't access them, and that is what worries me more than open source or proprietary.
So you're saying there's not much connection between this issue of data privacy and open source
Yeah,
versus proprietary?
yeah.
Okay. Priyanka, you brought in this point about what the government should do. So what is your ideal expectation? Should they come up with should there be a national platform, AI platform that's open and that's available for government use and others work on it? Is that what you're saying?
Kalyan, you actually hit the nail on the head. They are, they are already doing these kind of frameworks in place already. So we've always had this problem in India of getting structured data, because data is gold here. Garbage in is garbage out. So we do need robust data, which is edged to a point of the localities, the target demographic, and those kind of structured data is not available, or was not available until recent times. I think just this year, the government of India has launched a central repository called Data Kosh, and that technically gives you access to the different fields, from healthcare data sets to agricultural data sets. Again, like it might not be fully available for us to build a robust production grade solution, but at least it's a great starting point to bring on board the students to understand that, hey, look, if you're building for say for example a child malnutrition GPT, right? You probably will just take these parameters of the age, weight, height of the child, and understand whether this child is malnutrition or not on certain benchmarks. But for a country like India, which is vibrant and diverse in its demographics, If you go to, like, some place like Mumbai, like even the healthiest child would be called malnutrition, because probably you're not getting the right nutrition from the vegetables that they're bought in good localities also, versus a Dharavi slum kid. So that socio-economic strata is not baked into the data sets right now. And this is where I think government can come with the help of, again, a public-private enterprise partnership that we are currently seeing through India AI, through Data Coach. Again, a huge shout out to Triple ID Hyderabad, Vishwam AI. We've actually put their hands together to bring this kind of rich data set so we can build rich solutions, and are able to solve very India specific problems such as child malnutrition, or 23 million girls dropping out of schools. So
Think about education, Priyanka. Let's say, for instance, the big thing about the AI is that
yes.
it can personalize, and therefore it can reach the backbencher who generally gets ignored, not by design, but it's just the way the classroom works. The teacher has to cover the portion, so to speak, and then so that doesn't leave her or him enough time to focus on those who are left behind and bring them up. So it's an exam, and then they move on. They have lots of things to do, and AI is supposed to be sort of bridge that gap and help bring up our quality of education. That's been the hypothesis. In that case, what should the government make available? Like, if, or can only proprietary tools have that sophistication to give personalized teaching?
Wow.
Yeah, let Priyanka
Yeah,
go,
Bhanu,
and
you
then
want to
I
go ahead?
would like to add. No, no, after you. You go ahead, and I would like to add.
Sure, Bhanu. So, this, I really, if I had like a 5 crore grant, I would make sure that every 23 million of those girls get a personalized tutor, because then it could be, hyper personalized to their history, their, the background that they're coming from, the language that they can learn in, and even the IQ acumen that they can, because not all of these tools are catered towards, folks like ADD, ADHD, dyslexia. Sometimes you don't even know why one student probably is like slacking so much in math but is so good at the creative aspects. So why are we trying to pull that acumen towards math? Why don't we just let them be creative and flourish in their own area, right? So I think just if the AI is able to detect these kind of nuances, that would be something which the government can really help us out with, because I am truly a believer that everyone is born with an inherent talent, and you cannot box in people. And that's where somewhere our education system has failed us, where we are evaluated in terms of grades and not the talents that we are born with. So just to add to that, and this will be my final point, is how do we get AI personalized tutor based on geotag location, where somebody sitting in the tribes of Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh can actually understand in their own language, which could be, it might be listed as Hindi as the official language, but there's something much more tribal to their native area, right? So how can we bring these nuances as India and the government together would be a great start. So a personalized AI tutor would be my silver bullet. Over to you, Bhanu.
Yeah, so just like to build on what Priyanka talked about, and I will actually take something which is very, very, very tactical, right? One of the promise we as a nation make to all of our future children in grades 1 to 5 is that we will make them, literate both in language and numeracy, right? Uh, Now that is a promise for over 300 plus million children across the country, right? Now let's zoom into a particular state, right? I'm taking a solutions approach to this question actually, and bear with me as I walk you through this. Uh, in any school, one of the most consistent transaction which a teacher does from grade 1 to grade 5 is dictation, writing, and math practice, right? And you go to any school, whether it is a school with a 60 70 children, and I'm talking about all schools including the public schools, a 60 70 children school, or whether it is a school where 15 children who belong to different grades are just being serviced by one particular teacher inside the school in a remote village. all of them do these transactions, right? Now, as opposed to thinking about a whole open-ended generative AI kind of a companion, we can even look at extremely surgical, very specific sovereign AI tools. Like I can just build a dictation and writing practice tool or a math practice tool for the entire state. And every child gets 2, 3 dictations a week, and all they need to do is after they write it, they just need to scan the picture and upload, and the AI will then start segregating the classroom into three different groups, and in a while it will start giving each of the child different spelling dictations based on where they are at, and slowly move them forward, right? And this particular tool actually does not deal with extremely large data. It does not deal with it does not need the whole internet to solve for it. The amount of words we are expecting a child from grade 1 to grade 5 in any language to work is as a vocabulary of at the lowest ranging at 8,000 words and the highest ranging to maybe 18,000 words or 20,000 words to the best of the best children, right? And that is not a big data set to deal with, right? There are these very surgical ways of looking at some specific problems and then going after them. Now, can the state do this is the question, right? I believe they can, and my belief for that comes from the fact that in various departments, the government did digitize various services, right? Whether it is they who solved it or whether they got some service providers to solve it, right? Like we pay our electricity bills online, our Aadhaar is online. Now the APAR ID for children is going to come online. The public distribution system is digitized. So there is marked example and evidence of how governments and public institutions at system scale can digitize when they take a specific problem area, which is not the whole wild world, but a specific transaction which they need to do. And there, I think we in India have actually solved that kind of problems much better in digitization than even the West. Take example of our COVID vaccines, right? In the US, my counterpart in the US, if he has to prove that he had a COVID vaccine, he would have to pull out a paper. Now, I don't need to do that. I can just pull my mobile and show my 2 vaccines, right? So we as a nation have done it in the past when the problem statements have been very specifically defined, and we've actually done large scale digitizations, and that doesn't actually really cost too much when you distribute. Let's look at the solution which I just articulated, which is a dictation tool or a math tool where it gives a 3-time practice in a week, and assume that happens for the whole year, right? Now that whole model for a whole state of 2 million, 3 million children can be built at a physical expense of under 1,000 rupees per child across the state, right? Now that is minuscule in comparison to the 56 or 57,000 rupees which we allocate per child as a nation for annual education across the country, right? So even from a financial point of view, I think it is pretty doable. The only aspect is to not try to boil the whole ocean of education and say I will give you a companion which does everything, but actually pick very surgical situations. Like we are struggling for literacy, we are struggling for numeracy. Take those very silo specific problems and go after them. And I think, like I said, we have done it in other sectors and digitized quite well. I think there is possibility to do that even by a state department or a state education department, both from a technical point of view, from a feasibility point of view, and even from a fiscal allocation point of view.
Banu, excellent. So who should be this decision maker? Is it the district, the state, or the village, or the union government?
So all of these things just get unlocked where the fiscal decision really happens, because that is the basic thing which moves things. I mean, in the context of staying with education, it is either the state education department or the center and state putting money together. And these kind of solutions, when you allocate them into the fiscal budgets, like for the next 5 years, I will allocate 800 rupees per child for next 5 years continuously for these 2-3 solutions. that's a huge sum of money with which sovereign models can be built without any doubt.
Excellent. I hope Parth is dying to weigh in. So many questions deal with policy and such macro things. What Manu said was interesting, and I remember discussing this issue with another person, and he said that in India we make this mistake of one size fits all. We have this grand national idea, and that should not happen in education when we are deploying AI. Now, if we go back to your question about software, at that time I remember, well, AI is also suddenly thrust on us. I mean, it's not, nobody really predicted its deployment at such rapid pace and change. But at that time, I think we just didn't have the capacity to evaluate, and especially the government. It was just, you enter a government office, you'll see paper, right, everywhere. That was the situation. But we have built capacity as a nation across, including in the government. There's much capacity. Do you think they can handle this question in a more intelligent way, well thought out way? Where are we in India as far as AI knowledge is concerned?
Oh, I had no idea how much government knows about AI. So that's, I think, a different question altogether. I think picking up on what Priyanka and Banu's larger point is, right? I think we all know about Khan Academy, right? Khan Academy was created now, I think, almost 15 years or so ago. Accessible by anyone, for completely free, available to anyone, anywhere in the world, right? And in many cases, they have converted the primary English language website into local languages. I know there's one in Hindi, there's one has come up in Gujarati. So it's also available in local languages. If you ask how many people in schools, even in private schools, not just government schools, right, are using Khan Academy for their ongoing practice questions or any meaningful way, and those numbers are minuscule. So my sense is, one thing that I always remind myself, right, is that the technology is one part which makes it possible to do, but whether we do it or not depends so much more on our agency, right, human agency or human motivation. And I find that there's always a huge gap between what the systems are capable of doing or can allow us to do and what we are actually able to do through those systems, right? And I think that's where the gap between the human agency and the technology comes in. And so my sense is that, we can think about many different models. I at least know quite a few softwares done by various people in India, right, which make it sort of self-progressive learning, right, personalized learning. They have been available even before AI came on the scene. But no, their uptake is rather minuscule, even by governments, even or by private schools for that matter. So one thing I think one to understand is that human agency versus technology is one part. Second point, I think, about market and governments. My sense is that we are jumping the gun in a way. So every time a new technology comes up, it looks like it's a great benefit to the larger public, like population scale solutions can be created, can emerge from that. And we see market, the for-profit companies would not provide this kind of scale, would not serve the larger public, and therefore we need the government to do this, right? You can see this argument at every new breakthrough technology that comes up, right? I mean, we saw with the laptops, right? One laptop per child. It was a huge campaign. We thought that by just giving laptops to people in schools around the world, we'll be able to solve the problem of access and also of learning. Nothing really like that happened. Right? So I think it's important to two things. I find, for example, say Google Translate, right, has, I don't know, I have not really checked, but somebody can check that. And I think, I'm sure it's available also in many of the Indian languages, right? Duolingo, many language learning tools that are available online. They're also available in many different languages, local languages too. But we actually ran a whole experiment with several large sums of money involved to teach people how to speak English, right, in low-fee private schools. So we thought that poor parents are sending their kids to fee-charging private schools when government schools are available to them next door in most cases now in India, right? And largely reason they gave is because of the English medium, Right? They're saying, okay, government schools are in local medium. I want to educate my child in English medium, and therefore I'm willing to pay extra money, quite a substantial money, to send the child to private school. And we thought that is the English language is what drives them to private schools. Why can't we just teach them at least spoken English, right? Which would add so much more value to their job prospects. And we ran a whole experiment with an app was given for free. And even then, we found very little uptake. We had to really struggle to get students to practice regularly on the app for spoken English. Right? So I think in many of these cases, I think challenge largely is about human agency and motivation. And I think that's really is a much more difficult problem to solve. Technology obviously can make huge promises, but we are not able to realize those promises. Largely, you can say because of who we are and how we make decisions about what we want to do.
I think the key takeaway from at least what the three of you have been saying is it's better, especially in education, to go for sovereign AI systems, because if you take, as Manu was saying, what was the word you used? Targeted, right?
I mean, surgical solutions.
Surgical solution. Okay. So if you take surgical solutions, identify your problem very specifically, instead of just rolling out this AI system can do everything kind of thing, then we can build sovereign AI systems. So that's it's
I
sovereign.
would just, yeah, I'd just like to come in that Parth really brought out a very, very pertinent point in terms of the gap which we leave whenever we look at large-scale technology deployments. We leave out that last 3% which actually makes the magic happen. That is, are the incentives designed for it? Like, for example, the COVID vaccine, the incentive for COVID vaccine is that you can't do anything without that without not having that vaccine. So it's a negative incentive in a way, right? Sadly, for learning in health, because you have a fever, you have a negative incentive, you got to solve it. You got to take a pill, you got to solve it. But in things which are slightly longitudinal and prolonged, in like education, it becomes very tricky to design that incentives which change human behavior for adoption, right? And just in the interest of trying to do a little bit of design thinking, so at the lowest end of the pyramid, if the State Department basically kind of says that for every child where the practice has been consistent, right, you get another half a kilo of dal or sugar in the public distribution system. I'm just going crazy here a little bit by trying to look at that. But what I'm trying to get to is the point Parth made is that we also, apart from designing technology and everything, we have to also design the adoption incentives along with it and roll them out together. Otherwise, equity cannot be achieved.
I think we know lots of stories about incentives also, where they can go wrong, right?
Yes.
I think, of course, we heard about how British wanted to kill cobras or snakes in India, and they advertised that if you bring a head of a snake, right, I will give you money for it. And of course, what you got is not fewer snakes in the country, but a lot many more. So people began to, in a sense, farm snakes in order to get the money from the government. So I think my sort of sense is that looking at, from economic point of view in history that we do know, incentives are not that easy to design. And that's really where I think I agree with you, Banu, that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? And that's really is where the challenge is, not so much about technology, but about human agency.
But studies do show that the ideal learning place is still the classroom. I mean, there is a deficiency when you try to teach through technology. It is demonstrated, but then because of reasons of cost and all that, we're trying to leverage this technology to do this AI. That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, I think the point of bringing technology or AI into education was never to say that classroom education is not required or not important. Furthermore, it is extremely important. The role of what technology could do is that whole repetitive things which a teacher might not be able to do with 60 children in a class, or that whole personalization of, this child is so behind that there's no point if I give the same test I give to everybody. I have to work with him like one grade below and bring him up. That whole personalization is humanly not possible inside the way our current classrooms are designed, where there is one teacher and 30 children to 60 children. So it is more about the partnership of what happens in the classroom and what a technology can do both inside and outside the classroom, where the potential magic can lie. It's never a question of either or is my point. Yeah.
No, certainly, I think, but researchers have shown, especially field researchers, they have shown that this particular issue is really the reason behind why foundational literacy and numeracy is not really catching up at the school level. It's because of this problem that teachers are unable to reach all students and pull them up together. That is, in fact, the technology is trying to solve that particular problem. But Parth raised the issue of incentives. So, what incentives could work possibly when we are doing this, using this personalization feature of AI? Parth, would
Well,
you like?
I don't have an answer to that question. And I think there is no magic formula of incentives in a sense, right? There's no algorithm one can design to come up with the incentive that will work in this situation. I think your larger point about teacher presence in the classroom, right? So like Banu said, and I also keep saying all the time that it's not either or. It's not that we are replacing teachers in the classroom with technology. I think at the same time, I think if you think about it, the more we talk about technology in education, there's a less and less emphasis on the humans in education, right? Including particularly teachers. And so I think we are, even though in our mind we are not, in a sense, substituting one with the other, I think in practice there is always a trade-off, right? Amount of money government puts into technology, however small or large that may be, is money that's not available to put in the classroom. And I think it does matter, right? In terms of understanding our own priorities and where, and it could be different at different stages of education. Right? I'm not saying that there's one single formula from no kindergarten to PhD, but I think we're thinking about that maybe there are different tiers of education where require different kinds of engagement and human motivation in a sense to make the learning possible. Right? You ask yourself, now US and there are many countries which have no scarcity of resources. How are they training their children, educating their children? And you look at, for example, the Silicon Valley guys, right? Where are they sending? Which kind of schools their children go to? And it turns out that most of them send their children to schools which are not really using technology of any kind until in the primary education. Actually, they refuse to have devices being available even to the nannies, let alone the kids. Right?
Interesting. Priyanka, would you like to weigh in? What sort of incentives, in your practical experience, what incentives work?
Yes,
When
Kalyan, this
deploying-
one absolutely. This one's really close to my heart because we came up with the solution Dhan Kanya with respect to bringing education to children, which is around an incentive model. So it does, include this concept of skill currency, where for every module that you crack, the student is able to get like a reward point system, and with that reward point system, they are able to then go say buy utilities which are academic related, or go attend job fairs, or they can go attend some kind of sessions like these which probably they don't have access to, but with these incentives they are able to expand their horizons in thinking. So this is something which is kind of belongs to the exponential tech world. It might sound a little sci-fi at the moment, but education is moving towards a more decentralized way. We are already looking at campuses, which are on the metaverse. So you basically have a 3D spatial computing side of education where you can enter this realm where you have an entire city built. It looks pretty much like Dubai, but you are probably sitting in a small town of say Hubli in Karnataka, but you're able to attend, classes from the state of the art say New York University branch of Dubai or like Stanford in California, you're able to sit and attend those classes with these incentive reward systems. So that way, we are solving for infrastructure problem, we are solving for tech accessibility, we are solving for equitable outcomes overall for a country like India. I would love for all your audience to go explore polyversity.io. It's come up by IDS, and we are in partnership with them and trying to bring this to nook and corners of the world.
Okay, we had a very interesting, fascinating discussion. Some key points that emerged, I suppose, the importance of sovereign AI systems, importance of decentralization, importance of solutions being implemented, identified, problems being identified and implemented at local levels, probably state or perhaps even down the line. We also had a very interesting discussion about how the free software thing played out and what lessons could be learned from that. I will give each one an opportunity to sort of give your closing remarks, and who would like to go first? Priyanka. You're muted. You need to unmute
I think
yourself.
I'm muted.
Yeah.
Yes. So here we go. We are living in, such. It probably feels like the advent of electricity all over again. So how we are able to utilize the tools for developing our nation, bringing our builders and girls to the forefront of AI is what we are trying to do. So please, if you I would request all of your audience, if you're looking at pathways of free education, do reach out to me, because we are India's first paid forward community in AI, and we would like to take a 5-stage learning journey, which is also AICTE approved. It gives you like a 4-week internship. So, there are ways you don't have to pay oodles of money to just get a degree or internship. So do reach out to us, and we are here to make India the innovation capital. So let's get our curious hats going on, and not just rely on AI, but make it as an augmented brain. Thank you.
Manu, would you like to go?
I think this is a very important topic, obviously, and you have already organized quite a few sessions on this topic. So I fully agree that this is going to be a very important decision for us to make as a society, as a government, and also as a sort of civil society, right? The Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, all three have an important role to play. My sense is, no, our analogy with the software or with the language selection, whether it's local language or English language, English being the English being the sort of open source language, is available to free in a sense, while the local language is similar to a proprietary software in some sense. So I think thinking along those lines, I think there is no really one single solution that's available to us, including, for example, sovereign AI. I don't really think the governments would be able to create a sovereign AI which is going to work as well, right? I can't think of a single example of any even remote, small software which is created by any government. I'm not talking about Indian government, I mean the US government or any other government, right? That people are using with their love. I can't think of a single example of such a software being designed by government anywhere in the world. So I'm not sure that India is going to be pioneer in that area to tackle AI through the government agency. So I think we need both. I'm not maybe all three of them, Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, right? I think it's the congruence of those three, in my view, is going to give us something more concrete and more workable approach to how to train our kids in the next century.
Well, the point at that time was that we were looking at operating system after looking at the computer, right? So the model that was suggested was that just as IBM made its architecture open, so that became like an industry standard. It was not proprietary, and so everybody built on that. And people said, so there should be like a free operating system, and you build products on that. That was the argument at that time. I don't know if that's still relevant, but yes, Banu, go ahead. What's your
Yeah, so I think I totally align with what Parth is saying in terms of the questions whether sovereign AI can become a reality or not, and how soon, how fast, how good, how bad, right? What I would like to do back in the context of AI and education is to, leave every one of us with a question actually than my closing comments. A lot of time we just think about what can we put in the front of the student or what can we slam in the face of the student in terms of technology solutions. I would beg us all to kind of think about, can we in some places actually forget about the learner and actually build solutions and technology for the teacher to be able to do their job better. And maybe that is another pathway to looking at how AI and maybe even normal technology can make way into education and classrooms in a more meaningful way, with the main actor or main actor with agency, which is the teacher, being enabled and more capacitated with technology as a partner, as opposed to uh, trying to put a lot of stuff in the hands of the children and the teachers struggling to catch up.
All right. Thank you. Fascinating discussion. So we need to end this. It's 1 hour from where we started. Thanks, everybody. It was lovely having you here. We hope to have you again on another topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us. Thank you.